I want to talk a little bit about 6 factors we need to think of when we think about organisational change. Today is called Creating Thriving Tribes, and so it's mainly team by team, but there's also things we need to think of from an organisational perspective. And about 20 years ago, I led a culture change division for Morgan & Banks at the time, and was involved in lots of organisational change. And I learnt this, what's called a 6-cell model, in this process. And I think it's a wonderful way to think about the elements that are required to have a thriving culture in an organisation. And it really comes down to these 6 things. At this level, there's the self, the tribe, and the organisation. But we also need to think at the motivation level and the ability level. So I'm going to be talking today, later on today, and Derek's going to be expanding on this, about what's called an I care culture and how to best help people that are struggling and how to help those around it. But I want to just explain about the things we need to think of. Like if we want to create an I care culture, which is basically being a psychologically safe culture, which, as you've seen from Google, is quite a desirable thing, these are the things we need to think about. So this is cell 1. You know, does the individual enjoy helping those in distress? So you ask that, think about your team. Does everyone do that? As you know, some will do it willingly, some will avoid it like the plagues, some are in the middle. The second thing is, do they have the skills and knowledge to do it? And that's a really legitimate question, because in my experience, and I'm really convinced of this, most people want to help, but they don't feel confident on how to help. And we want to really fill that gap in today. At the tribal level, do others encourage that behaviour? Do others encourage that psychologically safe behaviour? Remember that people share equally in a psychologically safe environment, an I care environment. Do people ask for quiet ones to contribute? Do they tell verbose ones to maybe just shut it for a while and let someone else speak? What happens there? And so from a tribal ability thing, what impact do others have on the person's ability to follow an I care approach? Do they have a leader setting the example? Do they have the resources? Do they have the information readily at hand? Because I've worked for very, very large organisations, and in my experience, they have lots of good resources there, but no one can find them. They're buried in an intranet, and they can't readily find them. At an organisational level, so as we move through today, we're going to be, as I said, talking mainly about the self and the tribal level, because that, I think, is the foundation. But Sue Barnes, in particular, is going to be talking about the organisational level as well. So the organisational motive. So does the formal reward and recognition and performance management reward a psychologically safe environment? And then the 6th thing is, how do work layout policies, job design and other systems influence mental well-being and resilience? And I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there's a seminal work done by Tony LaMontagne for Vic Health. And he basically found that there were 3 levels of intervention in creating a low-stress environment. And tertiary is basically when you try and help someone after they've fallen over. Secondary is when you do training like this, like resilience training, mental health training. It's good, and hopefully there's some great takeaways from it. But by far the most important, he found, and he looked at peer-reviewed studies all over the world, is what's called primary or proactive. And so what that is actually taking a systems approach to change and a systems approach to injury. So when you're starting to see turnover, absenteeism from a certain area, actually asking 5 whys as it's happening and doing something about it. Changing processes, changing systems, changing flexibility, discretion. And this is hugely important, and Sue will talk about this later on today, but also the legal obligations that we all have, or every workplace has, to provide a psychologically safe environment. So, does anyone have any questions about that 6-cell area? 6-cell? Yeah.
Will you be sharing these slides?
Yeah, I'm happy to send PDFs to everyone of the slides. Yep. So don't scribble too much.